And we're live. How about that? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the pre-show for today's Security Plus study group. A study group, by the way, that's supposed to be tomorrow. But the schedule changed, so if you're here early, you are in good shape. You are with the rest of us. Okay, we can get rid of the... Well, let's keep the clock up, actually. Kind of like having the clock there for a moment. We have the studio ready to go. We are a day early. So if you were here last week on Wednesday, I said, come back Wednesday for the Security Plus study group. And here it is Tuesday. So that's kind of how it goes. But that's okay, because we'll do a study group anyway. I had a schedule conflict and needed to move this up a day. So I appreciate everyone's flexibility. If you weren't able to get here live because you were expecting it on Wednesday and you're watching the replay and you're wondering what happened, that's what happened. So don't worry too much about that, because there is a replay. There's always, and of course, if you're watching this after Wednesday, after tomorrow, none of this matters. No, well, it's not that it doesn't matter, but none of this matters. So we are good to go, though. We've got all the things we need for study group. I'm doing a quick check of cameras. Those look good. Recordings. Have I got recordings going? Yes. The Cylons are going down here. So we got recordings going. Hello, chat room. Welcome. People already checking in. Washington is here. Now, I'm wondering if Washington is on the East Coast and Washington is on the West Coast. I'm wondering if there's a difference. There might or there might not be. Not really sure. But there it is anyway. We're going to do all Security Plus today, by the way. So all Security Plus. Peru is checking in. Welcome, Peru. Silicon Valley. Tasman Drive is there. Welcome. We've got so much to go through, too. I've got a bunch of new questions, and then we'll open the phone lines up in the second hour. You can call in. You can put questions in the chat room. You can ask me questions. Maryland. Hello, Maryland. It's kind of hard to say Maryland that way. I'm more used to Augusta. That's how we would do it. So that's how it works out there. Hello, India. Welcome. Chicago. Cleveland is here. A lot of Midwest checking in all of a sudden. It's a pretty good time to do this. We can kind of catch a lot of different time zones. So hopefully that works out. I don't know. Is Tuesday better than Wednesday? There's Madison, Illinois. Dayton, Ohio. Welcome. Oh, Bill passed the Security Plus. Congratulations, Bill. There's Ireland. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Chicago's here. Oh, going to schedule your A+ Core 1. All right. Take it next week. Best of luck. Make sure you study all of those. So I think that's an important one. Kenya is here. LA, Algeria, San Antonio, Fairfax, Fredericksburg. It's quite an eclectic mix in the chat room, I have to say. There's India again. Aruba, welcome. I like the little umbrella with the sun, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all good. Columbus is here. Haven't been to Columbus in a while. Spent some time in Dublin. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. Michigan, welcome. There's Danville, Virginia. And South Carolina, welcome. Sao Paulo is checking into the chat room. Hello, Hannah from Manchester. Which Manchester? Because we have one in the U.S. There's one in the U.K. There's probably many Manchesters in the U.S. So I am expecting it's probably the one that's a little bigger than the one here. Algeria, again, checking in. Welcome. That's really great that folks are taking their Security Plus and passing them and getting them done, and it's all good. So very good. California is here. Nigeria. India. New York. Towns and Ice. Named it twice. Checking in. What's the best way you can check on your security clearance for a federal contract position? Got me, brother. I am not in the security clearance business, thankfully. That's a whole different can of worms. First, you have to get into a Zen place. You have to be in the zone, I think. There's probably quite a bit of red tape that goes around a security clearance for the federal United States government, I'm thinking. I'm guessing. There's Frederick, Maryland. My Maryland again. There's Nigeria. Welcome. You took your Security Plus exam yesterday. Didn't make it due to time. Time management on that exam is a challenge. I have to agree. But now you kind of know what to expect. Now, hopefully you got your piece of paper walking out that told you what to work on. But time management on the Security Plus is a big deal. It's something, it's a strategy on the exam you have to take into consideration. You're studying all those exam objectives. You're learning about the cryptography and all the things associated with attacks. And then now you have to worry about the clock. It becomes this extra thing. We got a 650. You were pretty close. The big scheme of things, you were right there in the right direction. So that's how it is. There's Scarborough, Maine. I was just talking with Mrs. Professor Messer about Camden, Maine, where we spent some time this summer. We liked it so much. Hello, Germany. Welcome. Another Columbus, Ohio. South Africa checking in. Welcome. Very nice. Pennsylvania. Thanks for being here. See, someone in the chat room knows you have to check your clearance on JPass via your recruiter or employer. They have to check JPass. Of course they do. See, there's a whole system. You have to know the system. Knowing the system is almost as important as knowing your technical content. It's probably just as important, isn't it, to make that happen? There's Atlanta. Welcome. Clearwater. Finally a local. Took that long to get Florida checking in. Another Atlanta. Security Plus versus CEH. Two different animals. Two completely different things. It's not really a versus. It's more of what are the two and which one should you be doing? Well, I guess it really depends on what you're planning to do. That's why there's never a good answer to what is the next certification I should take, or should I take this certification or this certification? I have zero context. We have to know what you're working towards, which means we can't answer the question. You're the one that has to figure out what you want to do next, and then you have to go with that. You have to figure out, oh, I want that job. That job is asking for this thing, therefore I need to go get that thing. There, problem solved. That was easy. I'm glad we really didn't solve anything, did it? Hello, Chicago. Hello, Jacksonville. Tampa is here. I see some Florida folks checking in. Thank you, Florida, for being here. We made it through the storm, didn't we? We thought it was going to be a thing. It turned out not to be a thing. Actually, in Tampa, it was a little bit of a thing. There was a little bit of wind. There was a little bit of twisty wind going on. So hopefully you guys made it to get there. Orlando here. Very good. Checking in. West Virginia. Welcome. Houston. You know, one of the things that I think I like about doing these live streams is that we get to kind of do all of this that we're doing now. Plus, we get to actually do something fun with the Security Plus. Let me get this thing ready to go, as a matter of fact. Put that right there. Hello, Alabama. Brooklyn's checking in. Sweden, welcome. Bonry is in Germany. Welcome. And there's South Florida. I will let Mrs. Professor Messer know that South Florida was here. She grew up in Hialeah. And I lived in South Florida. We lived in South Florida for 10 years. So I lived there. I'm sort of South Floridian, 10 years worth. So there you go. Is it possible to pass the Security Plus by studying a bunch of QAs only? Maybe it's possible. Of course it's possible. We're in the court of law. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Would you want to do that? No, you do not want to do it. You want to have videos and books and Q&A and hands-on. Those are the four things. Hello, Scotland. Miss you guys. I was in Scotland for a week over the summer too. In Edinburgh and Inverness. It was very nice. And enjoyed your local beverages very much. No, not Iron Brew. Or Iron Brew. There's no O. There's no... It's spelled funny. And I of course can't say any of it because I'm in the U.S. I have no concept how that works. Top of the hour, folks. It is time. So much time to get the Security Plus going. Let's see if I can figure out how to start the stream. Here we go. The local bet. Yes, we will start the stream as soon as I get on my screen the things that I need to have on my screen, which apparently I don't have. We'll get them in a moment. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2019 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group, coming to you live from our world headquarters here at Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. If you're watching live, thank you, chat room. We just were doing a pre-show and talking about all the fun and frivolity we were having over the summer. But now it's October. Now we're getting into crunch time. Holiday season's upon us. It's right there. We're getting into that, the beginnings of all of the end of the year fun. I think this is a good time to be studying for certification. Things are kind of winding down. Although if you work in retail, things are winding up. You're doing a lot more and making sure things, we're probably close to the network freeze time, aren't we? For those of you that aren't in retail, you probably have not had to do that, where there's a certain date where now until after New Year's, nothing changes. No updates, no changes to the network, no new installations. That's the beauty of the retail. So it's season for all of us in some way or another. We have so many things to talk about today. We've got all Security Plus today, and that's the thing that we're going to focus on. Today, I'm going to be asking you questions in this first hour, and you're going to be answering them live and online. The way you do that is you pop open a new browser window, and you go to professormesser.com/QA. The QA stands for something. Question and answer. That's what it stands for. professormesser.com/QA. That will take you right to an existing question that's there. So that's another thing you can look at. You can also load up an app on your mobile device on your phone. This app is the Socrative Student app. That's the one you want to look for. The Socrative Student app. It will ask you for a room name, and that room name is Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. Make sure you spell it right, or you won't find that particular room is there. Nobody will be there. You're wondering what's going on with that. You don't want that to happen. The Socrative Student app is one you want to do. So hopefully you'll be able to find all of that. Open the window, professormesser.com/QA, go to your Socrative Student app, and a question will be waiting for you. I knew there was something I did not have up on my screen, and that was the question. This is really the most important part of this, is getting the question ready for you. The question asks, which of the following could be used to obtain the banner of a service? Now, if this looks familiar, it should if you were here last month, because this is a question from last month's study group. We call this our study group rewind question, and it will absolutely be something, hopefully, be something you remember. Absolutely, it'll be something you remember. You got a lot of different options there, and the different options are TCP dump, netcat, dig, traceroute, and netstat. So you have 5 different options there to choose from. And as you can see on my side, as you're putting in your answer, interactively, these numbers are going to change, and you'll be able to see how people are going through and answering their question. So if we went with the majority right now, 51% of you said netcat. So that is one good idea. Maybe netcat is the right one. Although 14% said dig, 11% said TCP dump, 12% said netstat. We're going to find out. Keep voting. We're going to go through more of these. Keep working on those questions. We'll see how you did. Don't forget, by the way, that you can always see what's going on here by following us on the Twitter and the Facebook. You can type professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you'd like to find us on. So if you're on Twitter, do a /Twitter. YouTube is a great place to go. And if you're watching us live, if you could subscribe to our channel, it does help us a lot. I know people on YouTube, they always say, please subscribe. There's a reason, because the folks at YouTube see those subscription numbers, and they help us out with the things going on our channel. Also on Instagram at professormesser.com/Instagram. You've got a lot of other things going on here too. Don't forget about the Security Plus course notes that are available. If you just want an easy way to save time, streamline all of your studies, focus directly on the content that is in these videos rather than having to write these notes yourself or having to figure out how to watch every single one of these videos and do this yourself, then you want to check out the course notes. They are available at professormesser.com/securitycn. The course notes are a pretty good way And I'll just flip through a few pages of it, the one I have here on the screen. This is over 94, 95 pages of Security Plus. It goes video by video as well, which is great. You're able to really figure out how you can summarize everything in one place with these course notes. So feel free to go through and figure out all the course notes and what's there. Have a look at them. Everything is in there. You'll find out about that at professormesser.com/securitycn. Also want to let you know, if you want to support the website in other ways, you can help us out financially. We're getting into that holiday season. If you're someone who buys things on Amazon, go to professormesser.com/Amazon first. Your price won't change on Amazon, but they will give us a bit of a commission. It really helps us keep things going on this side as well. You can find that again at professormesser.com/Amazon. I've also got this podcast, or this live stream, available as a podcast in audio-only form, along with my A+ and Network Plus podcasts, available at professormesser.com/podcast. So that's another one you can have a look. The podcasts that are there are everything that we do here. It's just in an audio form. So if you have a podcast app where it can download these automatically for you, it's a great way to subscribe and keep track there as well. If you stop back by in the next day, you'll notice that there are timestamps on the YouTube video descriptions. So if you go back to any of these study groups, you can hop to any question either in the first hour or questions that are posed in the second hour, and you can simply click on the number and go directly to it. It's a great way to find exactly what you need and find it very quickly in the YouTube video descriptions. Today, we're going to talk all about Security Plus. The latest version of Security Plus is the SY0501. It was released in October of 2017. So it's been out for a couple of years. We would expect it to still be around for another year and a half. So if you're studying for your Security Plus, keep studying. There's not going to be a new version for quite some time. So keep going with that. It's a single exam that makes it easy. 90 minutes long, a maximum of 90 questions. We were talking in the pre-show how important time management is. So make sure that you're familiar with that. Passing score on this exam is a 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. And there are both kinds of questions on this exam, primarily multiple choice, but you're going to find performance-based questions on this exam as well. Performance-based questions are questions that are anything but multiple choice questions. And I have a performance-based question for you coming up next, right after we finish this rewind question that asked, which of the following would be used to obtain the banner of a service? And 62% of you have said, yep, it's Netcat. That's the one that we want to work through. Netcat is the right answer as well. There's Netcat. It's not really a cat. It's network concatenation. That's what that stands for. So it's able to pull information off the network and simply show it on the screen. Or in reverse, you can put information onto the network. A pretty nifty utility. It's kind of difficult to get the feel for, to get the hang of it, but once you do, you realize how powerful this little utility happens to be. It's a great way to see if a port is open. It's a great way to send information to a service and see if you can get anything back from that service. It's also a great way to create a backdoor and run a shell from a remote device. There's all kinds of different versions of Netcat that you'll find for different operating systems. For example, NCAT is another good example of one that you can find on other operating systems. TCP dump is an application utility. It's a utility that you would use to capture packets, but it would not be able to obtain the banner of a service on its own. You still need something to request the banner, and TCP dump just passively listens. So it will never request the banner of a service. DIG is a domain internet groper. That's what that stands for. It allows you to query domain servers. There was a question in the chat room earlier. Is that a Linux utility? Linux and Mac OS and Unix? It is primarily that, but you can download a version of DIG for Windows, which is pretty nice, by the way. If you aren't running DIG in Windows, and you'll find that it's such an improvement over NSLookup. There are links on my video. I think it's the bind distribution for Windows that includes a dig.exe. So that's what you want to Google, is the bind, B-I-N-D, the Berkeley Internet domain name, B-I-N-D, Berkeley Internet Name Daemon, right? Name services daemon. So bind is the one you want to find that has dig.exe in it. Traceroute, fantastic for finding routes of things, but not very good for obtaining the banner of a service. And lastly, netstat, which can tell you a lot of information about who you're connecting to and who's connecting to you, but it doesn't give you banner information. The best answer, really the only answer here, netcat, answer B, 64% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Our rewind question worked extremely well. Most of you, I think, remembered that one from the list. Thank you for double checking me on my bind. I don't have to remember that one very often, but a nifty utility, also a nifty program to use if you're doing name services. Let's do a different kind of question, though. I mentioned earlier that the exam will start with a handful of questions that are not multiple choice. So if you're expecting multiple choice when you start up the exam, this might throw you, but you're not going to be thrown because now you know exactly what to expect. These are questions that are anything but multiple choice. So they are fill in the blank, drag and drop. They'll put you to command prompt, have you perform a function. They will ask you to put things in a particular order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. There's all kinds of things they could ask you. But all of those things that they will ask you are things that you will know from the exam objectives. So don't worry that it's being asked of you in a particular way. What you want to do is go through all of these things and figure out how to answer them given what you know. So I have for you, like we do, the very first question of every study group is a performance-based question. And this performance-based question, as a reminder, don't answer in the chat room. We want to answer on our Socrative by going to professormesser.com/QA. Here's your performance-based question of the month. I want to match the technology to the description. Now, one of the things you'll notice, there are 4 technologies, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 descriptions. So you're not going to be able to do a one-to-one. There will be descriptions left over when you are finished with this because there is only one description for every one technology. I guess that part is a one-to-one, but you're going to have 3 left over at the end. So this is a little bit harder. See, now I mixed it up a little bit for you. Now you really have to read through these. For those of you listening in on the podcast side, let's go through each of these technologies. We have confusion, hash, non-repudiation, and asymmetric. Those are the 4 technologies. Now I have these 7 descriptions, which are decryption keys are different than the encryption keys. Our second description is encrypt fixed length groups. The third description is one-way algorithm. The fourth is the process of making something unclear. The fifth is validity can't be denied. The sixth is encrypted data is very different than the plain text. And the last one is variability in a hash output. So hopefully you can see, if you think they're all lined up the way they should be, you can simply put into the fill in the blank that is now available. I've just turned that answer on. And you can answer this at professormesser.com/QA. So if you think they're already in the right order, you would put 1A, 2B, 3C, and 4D, and you're done. See how easy that was? Oh, no, it's not even close to being that simple. Those are not the correct answers. You have to find the right technology and the right description and put these together. There are quite a few different kinds of matching questions that you could be asked on a performance-based question on this exam. So hopefully you're familiar with some of these technologies and what they do and what they mean. Just add them into the fill in the blank that's there. You can list out exactly what it is. You don't even have to put the 1, 2, 3, 4. Just put what you think it is. If you think the answer is A, B, C, D, simply put A, B, C, D in there. That's fine with me too. A lot of you are already putting in answers. Some of you know these. Some of you are doing pretty good in this list. In the chat room, some folks asking, not specific to this question, people are asking, am I considering adding Pen Test Plus to my materials? No, not at the moment. Pen testing, by the way, sounds so exciting. It is such a fun idea, isn't it? To be able to hack into somebody's network. The problem, though, is there's so few jobs. Relatively speaking, so few jobs in pen testing. There are so many other jobs in the larger group of IT security that pen testing is such a small niche that it's a little bit too nichey for my taste, at least at the moment, to be able to do that. And I get it. Not to say there aren't pen testing jobs out there. There's plenty. I know lots of people who do pen testing. I know a lot more people who don't. who are in IT security doing everything else related to IT security. It's fun, it's exciting, it's sexy, but it's not something that has a broad appeal. And I certainly don't want to have people thinking that there is a high percentage job availability for pen testing, because there certainly is not when you compare it to everything else. Let's see how we did with this question. Sorry about that. Sorry about no pen testing. So sad for this. It is a neat line of work, though. And if you can get a job pen testing, rock on. Keep doing that. They pay very well, I understand. Let's do some technologies and descriptions. Let's start with confusion, which I thought would be a good way to start off this list. If you have confusion with your cryptography, it means that the encrypted data is very different than the plain text. This is a fundamental characteristic of cryptography. You don't want to encrypt something and then have the encrypted data in some way look similar to what you started with. It needs to be so different that there's no possible way someone could interpret what the original plain text was. So confusion is an important consideration in cryptography. So that would be number one, is matched with letter F. Encrypted data is very different than the plain text. Next on our list was a hash. A hash is a one-way algorithm. So if you answered C for hash, that's the one that it would have been. This one-way algorithm, you can't go backwards from a hash. You can't take a hash and somehow figure out what the hash was related to originally. It doesn't work that way. So a hash is very useful, for instance, for storing things like passwords, because you can store a password securely. There's no way for somebody to look at that hash and know immediately what that password happens to be. Immediately being that operative word. Third on our list was non-repudiation. Fancy word. That's a $5 word right there. Non-repudiation means the validity of what we are discussing can't be denied. The validity of this email, the validity of this document. Non-repudiation, very commonly implemented using digital signatures. So if I sign something with a digital signature, later on in this study group, I'm going to give you instructions on how to get a CEU from me, and that CEU will be digitally signed. There'll be an attachment with my digital signature. When you receive that, you will know it came from me. The validity of that can't be denied, and you will know that everything in there is exactly the way it was when I sent it. So you'll be able to verify that when you get it, that it not only is exactly the way I wrote it, but you know it really, really, really did come from me. And it really does. So that's you know it when you get that digital signature. And asymmetric was our last one. Number 4, asymmetric. Well, the A in asymmetric, symmetric meaning the same, asymmetric meaning different. So the decryption keys are different than the encryption keys. Asymmetric encryption works that way. If it was symmetric encryption without the A at the beginning, then the decryption key is exactly the same as the encryption key. And we use both types of encryptions all the time in our technologies and the things that we're doing. So those are your 4 answers. Confusion is matched with the encrypted data is different than the plain text. A hash is a one-way algorithm. Non-repudiation means the validity can't be denied. And asymmetric means decryption keys are different than the encryption keys. Okay, bonus time. Let's see how we do. We're going to do 3 fill in the blanks because we have 3 of these that weren't matched. But those 3 do describe a type of technology. So let's start with the first one that we did not match, which was letter B, encrypt fixed length groups. So what technology would encrypt fixed length groups? That would be a block cipher. So if you're encrypting these blocks of information at a time, that is called a block cipher. And that's a little different than a stream cipher, which would be encrypting small little pieces at a time, usually a byte at a time, and going through. But when you have a fixed length group, it's a block cipher. Next on our list that we did not match, the process of making something unclear. That's right, the process of making something unclear. If you're trying to make something unclear, then you're trying to obfuscate it. Obfuscation. Another fancy schmancy word, but it's impressive. Talk about obfuscation. If you're trying to take a text file and somehow make it difficult to read, but still able that somebody who knows how to read it would be able to interpret that. You're obfuscating. We often see obfuscation described when we're talking about hiding things, like hiding information inside of a graphics file. That's a type of obfuscation. And the last thing that did not match, a variability in hash output. Whenever you're hashing things, you're hashing a different document. Maybe you have a set of documents and you hash these 10 different documents. There should be 10 different hashes. In fact, there should be 10 very different hashes. Even if only one character in that document changed from document to document, the hash output should be remarkably different between them. And if you want to create a variability or describe what that variability in hash output is, that would be diffusion. You're working through diffusion on these. Now, the hash output, a lot of folks said, well, salt. Well, salt is a way to add additional diffusion to a hash, but it is not the variability itself. Hash in it on its own should provide variability from document to document, from plain text to plain text, from whatever you're working with to hash, should automatically have that variability, and we call that variability diffusion. Diffusion. So you don't need a salt to diffuse. Hashing on its own should provide diffusion. If your hash does not properly diffuse, then you are able to start interpreting what information may be inside the original document. You're able to see that these are similar to each other. You should not be able to do that with a hash. Whenever you have a collision with hashes, means you took two very different inputs and it created the same hash. Boy, no diffusion there at all. Did not work properly. And that's how we know that a hash was not the right algorithm, or there might be a vulnerability in that algorithm. So there you go. Those are the 3 bonus ones. You folks did really good in the chat room on that one. Not very often we get to put our answers into the chat room. So it's a good example. But now we're done putting answers in the chat room. Now we're going to answer online. So I have multiple choice questions for you to go through. Let's step through the next set of multiple choice questions. This first question asks, when visiting a website, a browser complains that the website is not trusted. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this error? Would it be that the certificate is expired? Would it be that the web server version is outdated? Would it be that the server has a segmentation fault? Would it be that the server is configured with the default settings? Or would it be that the server license is invalid? Hopefully you're familiar with what it would not be trusted. If you think you know the answer, you want to lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Again, please no answering in the chat room. No hints in the chat room either. We're going to try to figure this out on our own. When visiting a website, a browser complains that the website is not trusted. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this error? Is it that the certificate is expired, the web server version is outdated, the server has a segmentation fault, the server is configured with the default settings, or the server license is invalid? Lock in your answers. Hopefully it's one way to go about doing this. This is one of those things, by the way, that's an important one. This goes back to the 6th section of the exam objectives, where we talk about problems with web servers. And getting a message saying the website is not trusted is an important one you do need to know. In fact, I want to say that is specifically written in the exam objectives. So make sure you are familiar with these types of problems and what might cause them, because you will absolutely find this. In fact, you'll find this when you're surfing around the internet. You'll hit a website and suddenly it will tell you this website's not trusted. Your browser pops open a message. Why did that happen? Well, let's see if we know why it happened. Let's see how we did with this one. 91% of you said the certificate's expired. I hope that's the answer. What if it's not the answer? We're going to find out in a moment. 3% of you said the web server version is outdated. 3% also said the server license is invalid. 2% said the server is configured with the default settings. And 0.00% said the server has a segmentation fault. Whenever you run into problems with trust, it's always related to the certificate. You're trying to do encryption to this device, and if there is an issue with that certificate, and there's so many things that can go wrong, then you're going to have a trust issue on the server. The certificates should be relatively new. We don't want certificates to be 3 years old. In fact, our browsers now are getting to the point where they will tell you that the certificate is valid, but it's over a year old, therefore I don't trust it anymore. So it could be a perfectly valid certificate, but age is always a concern. If you're someone who uses some of the newer certificate creations, utilities that are out there, they want you to update those certificates every 2 to 3 months. And some people do them even more frequent than that. Every month, they might get a new certificate. So it's one of those that would be something to consider whenever you work through that. So there's a series of checks that occur when you pop open your browser, you visit a website, that browser requests the certificate and then checks it out. Is it signed by somebody that the browser trusts? Okay, I can trust that part of it. Is it a certificate that has the proper amount of encryption in the hash? Does it have a strong hash? Yes, it does. And is it less than a year old? No, it's 3 years old. I don't trust it. Or the certificate has expired. There are expiration dates to these certificates as well. And if the date is expired, you'll get a message on the screen. Don't trust it. That's an expired certificate. Now, in the chat room, some folks are making a good point. It's expired, but it's still working. It's still the same certificate it was yesterday when it was valid. Today, it's not valid anymore just because a day went by. And that's a perfectly valid criticism. The argument is that you want these certificates to constantly change because just like your password, in the meantime, you don't know who may have gotten their hands on this. So if you can always keep your certificate fresh, people can assume that the certificate is more secure than one that may be years old. So there is a security validity check there. But to the point that if it's a day over its expiration date, and you're really not planning to put any information into the site, you're not planning to send any information to the site, could you still use it? Well, even though you're not inputting something into the site, there could still be important information going between your browser and that device. You're certainly losing a little bit of privacy when you're not encrypting that data. So it's not a 100%, but you are still encrypting. These certificates not trusted. It will still encrypt for these, but you'll want to let the website owner know that their certificate is no longer valid. They need to update the certificate. Usually they'll find out pretty quick when that's the case. There's always a risk. There's a risk with everything. And as these certificates get older, it's certainly a bigger risk. An interesting stat from my course, by the way, is that a researcher went and looked at iOS apps and found 76 apps. This was in February 2017. Found 76 iOS apps missing the certificate check. So they did encryption. They grabbed the certificate from that server, brought it back. The certificate was invalid in some way, and the app didn't care. It just kept going. So even using bad certificates, the app was not letting us know that was a problem. That's your check. That's your one chance to at least inform the user there might be a security problem here, and those 76 apps did not provide any type of check for the end user. And as this points out, from these apps, 18 million downloads on these apps, and now it's very easy to do a man in the middle because there's no check. It's not even you that has to worry about it. The app itself doesn't do any checks. How sad was that? Well, I didn't really fool anybody with that one. 92% of you said the certificate is invalid. That's absolutely correct. All of these other things are definitely concerns. A web server version being outdated, server licenses being invalid, the default settings being set, and segmentation faults are all concerns, but they have nothing to do with the trust that's in a server. That is all based around the certificate. And if you're trying to figure out why you're having a problem with trust, that's where you want to focus your efforts. Well done, everybody. You were spot on with that one. Let's do another one. Maybe this one will be harder for you. Or maybe it'll be just as easy. We'll see how my day was going when I created these questions. The first time I go through these, they sound really hard, and then you look at them and they're really easy because this question asks, a cloud service is configured to scale up when the application becomes busy and scale down when the demand is low. Which of the following describes this characteristic? Is it templates, redundancy, elasticity, fault tolerance, or segmentation. 5 different technologies. All 5 of these, by the way, on the Security Plus exam objectives. But only one of them applies here. A cloud service is configured to scale up when the application becomes busy and scale down when the demand is low. Which of the following describes this characteristic? Is it templates, redundancy, elasticity, fault tolerance, or segmentation? If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in your answer. I can't wait to see how we do on this one. I'm not even going to peek. I'm going to wait. We're going to see how you answer. We're all going to be surprised at the same time. Folks in the chat room talking about certificates. A good example, Let's Encrypt. I see some folks talking about that in the chat room. Is an excellent way to get a perfectly free certificate for your public web server and not have to pay anything. So this is fantastic. I take advantage of Let's Encrypt for servers. You don't see this certificate because it's on the inside of my network, but I have a lot of Let's Encrypt certificates that I use on my web servers here. In fact, I have to do a lot of things manually, unfortunately, because of the way I've got my servers configured. But it's great. I click a button, it refreshes all my certificates. I just have to copy the files out there. Makes it very easy to do that. Very simple. Comes in handy, too, to have this free certificate, and it's trusted by all the browsers. That makes it fantastic. I don't know why more people don't do that. It's just a simple and easy way to manage certificates on your web servers. Let's focus instead on the cloud. Here's the question that you had to figure out, is that your cloud service is configured to scale up and scale down. But what is that when you scale up and scale down? 88% of you, not quite as strong as it was in the last question, but 88% of you say that's elasticity. 5% said fault tolerance, 4% said segmentation, 4% said redundancy. So I'd say that's a 3-way tie for second. And then 0% said templates. So there you go. You've got a few different options, but if we go with the vast majority, they say it's elasticity. Scalability in the cloud is incredibly important. That's one of the great benefits of the cloud, of course, is that at any time the cloud can scale up. I was mentioning in the actual pre-show for this that we were talking about the retail establishments starting to be able to put a freeze on their networks, and they're probably going to scale some things up as the holiday season approaches. So they are certainly going to want to have an elastic type of system. This is one that you really do want to know as you're working through all the things that have to do with cloud computing. This is an important characteristic because this is the fundamentals of what we are doing, is being able at any point to make the network more scalable. And the way you're going to do that is to be able to increase the number of resources when they are needed, and then, of course, scale them back when they are no longer needed, because you don't want to waste more money by having all these systems out here. If it's just a single server, that's one thing. If it is 100 servers, it's very different. So it's another one of those things you have to think about whenever you're planning your cloud-based implementation. And elasticity is the one that is correct. 88% of you answered correct on this one. I think that was kind of a tell. When we look at the total number of options you were looking at, cloud computing, of course, is on your A+, your Network Plus, and Security Plus certification exam. You have to know about cloud computing. Now, the questions that we do in the study group are questions that give you an overview of some of these technologies. It's not designed to emulate an actual exam, but of course, after you finish studies like this, it would be nice to take an exam, or at least go through questions that had similar difficulties to what you would find on the actual exam. And that's why I wrote an entire book for this called My Security Plus Practice Exams. These are 3 separate practice exams that all have questions that are similar in style. I tried to emulate the voice of the exam, so you would have the same cadence and same feel of the questions that they ask on the actual exam, and they're questions that I think have a similar difficulty level of the actual exam. So once you've gone through the study groups, you've gone through your videos, you've gone through your hands-on, you've really studied everything, you're wondering, do I really know everything I need to know? You can go straight to the questions that I have on the sample exam. In fact, you can download a sample from professormesser.com/securitype, security practice exams. In fact, all of these have not only the question, sort of like when we ask on the study group, we're wondering what the questions are, but you can go to a detailed answer for the question that not only tells you what the answer is, but it tells you what all of the incorrect answers are and explains why each one of those answers was incorrect. I do this for every single question on the exam. You will never again wonder why one question was right and why the other questions were wrong, because I tell you exactly why. I also put with all of these a link that you can click on to go directly to my website and watch the video that discusses the topic that was listed in the question. There's also a QR code, so you can bring up the camera that's on your phone. In fact, if you want to do it right now on your screen, bring up the camera. You don't have to take a picture of it, but put it up as if you were going to take a picture, and the camera of your phone will see that QR code and then open a browser screen that will take you to the video that discusses this question, which is discussing protocols used with TLS to provide secure communication. Those are all, and every single question on my in here is exactly like this. You'll find a lot of interesting things again in these practice exams. You'll find this at professormesser.com/securitype, or just follow the links on my website under the Security Plus links for the practice exams. Pretty useful to have that too. And there are 3 really solid practice exams in there too. Literally took me months to write, and I'm very proud of this book. I think you'll like it too. Find out more at professormesser.com/securitype. Let's do some more questions though. This is a time we should be studying, so let's do some more studies. I have plenty of questions to go through. This next question asks, which of these access control models combine multiple parameters to potentially build a complex set of rules? Not so easy anymore, is it? Suddenly got a little more complex. This question asks, which of these access control models combine multiple parameters to potentially build a complex set of rules? The possible answers are discretionary, role-based, attribute-based, and mandatory. Those are the 4 access control models you have to choose from. I didn't give you 5 on this one. I gave you 4 to be able to work through these and figure it out. If you think you know the answer, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's the place to lock it in. Now, if you're watching this in the replay, obviously you won't be able to do that and be able to work through it. Which of these access control models combine multiple parameters to potentially build a complex set of rules? Is it discretionary, role-based, attribute-based, or mandatory? Have a look at those. Yeah, folks in the chat room are talking about the practice exams. Here's the actual, I have a physical version of the practice exam book, 400 pages and I'll ship it to you. You get the digital version, by the way. If you ever buy the physical version of my products, you get the digital version to use immediately. So that's another nice thing while you're waiting on this to arrive. Boy, it's big. There's a lot in there. And being able to work through that. Maybe something that you can work through as you're working on. It is a thick book. It's a big one. That's a thick one. 400 pages worth it's got to be. I couldn't make it any bigger on the practice exams than 400 pages because it would just be way too big. I hate those books that are so enormous that you just can't even carry them around. But this one's just about to have that there. The physical version of this is $40. So it's a little bit more expensive because it's a physical book. I got to print it up. It's got all these pages in it. But it is something that you can use. And it still has, it's exactly the same on the digital version. In fact, the QR codes I really put in this book so that if somebody's reading the book, they can use those QR codes. So it's kind of nice. It's just an exam. It's not a study guide. It is sample exams. It's literally a 90 question exam. There are 5 performance-based questions at the beginning of each one of these and 85 multiple choice questions. So I separated it out and distributed the questions in the exact same percentage as you would find in the exam objectives. So hopefully it will emulate the actual exam. The one thing I did do, though, is I made every question a little different. You know, when you're taking the exam and one question is very similar to another question on the same exam just because it's so random? Well, I didn't do that. I wrote questions that were all very different. So you won't see any repeats in here. It's very hard to have one question kind of spoil another question on the exam. So I really worked very hard to make this a very solid, well-designed practice exam for you. Let's see how solid your answers were on this question. Which of these access control models combine multiple parameters to potentially build a complex set of rules? Well, we did get a majority on this one. 60% of you say that is attribute-based. 25% of you, though, say that it is role-based. 9% say it's discretionary, and 5% say it's mandatory. Do we go with the majority on this one, which is the attribute-based? I would if I were you, because that is the right answer. The attribute-based access control, the ABAC. If you ever see that abbreviated, I don't know why we abbreviate access controls. That doesn't make much sense to me, but we do. We abbreviate everything. But an attribute-based access control allows us to combine a lot of different attributes together. And it can be a lot of different things from different parts of the organization. You combine all those things together to be able to determine if someone has access to this resource or not. So it might be somebody who, what type of job description do they have? What IP address are they coming from? What time of the day is it? And you combine all those things together and then determine if someone has access. So it's very interesting how you can combine a lot of these attributes together. We're seeing this more and more and more, especially on things like next generation firewalls that have to determine if somebody's connecting through a VPN, are they coming in at a time of day we would expect? Are they coming in from an IP address in a country we would expect? Are they coming in from an interface we would expect? So all of those things become useful. In fact, those even go a separate step. They can grab information from the device that's being used. Does that device have one of the company's certificates on it, which would validate the device that was in use? Does this device happen to be in a location with a GPS marker so we can see what GPS location it's coming from? Very interesting set of attributes you can use to determine what type of access you get. And those combined together create an attribute-based access control model. That is the right answer. 61% of you got that one absolutely right. There are a number of different, we're not going to go through all these different access control models that are on here, but I have a single video that you can go through. It is in my SY0501 course, section 4.3, access control models is the name of this video. You can go through that video, and I go through each one of these in detail so you can understand what mandatory access control, what role-based access control means, what discretionary access control can do for you. All of these access controls, and I didn't even put all of them on here, all of these access controls are listed in the exam objectives, so make sure you're familiar with them. It becomes really, really important when you start getting ready for your exam that you understand what all of these happen to be. And you would think this doesn't sound like something IT security people do, but in fact, this is exactly the type of things we have to deal with, especially when setting policy, which is an important part of what we do in IT security. Let's do another question, shall we? I have one here. Since we're talking about policy and procedure, I have a policy and procedure question for us, and it asks, during which incident response process would an IPS log be examined? During which incident response process would an IPS log be examined? Would that be in eradication, lessons learned, identification, recovery, or preparation? Those are your 5 different incident response levels, parts of the process that you need to figure out. During which of those would an IPS log be examined? During eradication, lessons learned, identification, recovery, or preparation? Lock in your answers. Go to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock it in. If you're watching this in the replay, you can, of course, follow along with us. Make a note. You'll be able, although you can't go to professormesser.com/QA, we're not live. You can always, of course, follow along with us. If you would like to join us live, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, and there is a calendar link on the main page of the website, and that will tell you when the next live event is going to be. Hopefully that will be something to help you. So if you're watching this months from now, you may want to know when's the next time we're getting together so you can do this live along with all of us. And you can find that at professormesser.com/calendar for this. The incident response process, another important thing you have to know for the exam. It is in the CompTIA exam objectives. The incident response process is an important one. You will probably be involved with an incident or with your organization's incident response process. Even if you're not in the security group, you are often involved in some way. So this is one where you do have to think about what you would use during this incident response process. Let's see how we did with this one. Well, we had 75% of you that said it's identification is what we would look at an IPS log as during that identification. Only 4% said preparation, which I thought there would be a larger number there. 10% said recovery, 7% said eradication, and 4% said lessons learned. So whenever we have an IPS log, we have to think about what's in an IPS log. Well, we know that an IPS log, an intrusion prevention system, commonly finds known types of attacks. So if there is a known type of buffer overflow, of SQL injection, of Microsoft vulnerability that is well known, an IPS will identify this. So if we happen to have an IPS pop open a message and say, here's something that's going on, then somebody has sent some actual attack data into our network, and it's been seen by the IPS. Now, what did the IPS do? Maybe the IPS blocked it. Maybe the IPS was configured to allow it. Maybe the IPS blocked some and allowed others. We would have to look at the log to know exactly what the disposition was of the vulnerability that came in, or the attack that came in to a particular vulnerability. So that's our challenge. There are many different phases of the incident response process that we would do that in. The one we're most considering or trying to find is the one that's telling us about identifying what has happened. There are certain identifiers that can help you figure out that an attack is underway. And you might have, for instance, antivirus software. If somebody manages to get a virus onto a machine, your antivirus may report on that. If you have an intrusion prevention system or a host-based or network-based intrusion prevention system, that's another thing that can be done. If network traffic has just changed dramatically, it doesn't even have to be a vulnerability attack. It may not even be something that's known. It may just be the utilization on the network suddenly spiked. And maybe that would be significant enough to tell us something is going on. That would be something that occurs during this identification phase. So if you're someone who's trying to identify an attack, you might use a number of different resources to do that. An IPS log is absolutely one of those. A DLP log is also another good way to do it. An ARM-on device, a device that is designed to a firewall log, that might be a good one to do it. Antivirus logs, anything that tells you something's up, something weird is going on, would be perfect to use during this identification phase. And that's why if you answered C, identification, that's the way to do it. The preparation phase is what you do well before that. Before you even have any idea that anyone will be coming into your network, you need to plan. You need to have the right tools. You need to put the IPS in place. You need to put the intrusion and logging systems in place. You need to have the DLP and the ARM-on devices and the host-based firewalls and the host-based antivirus and anti-malware. All those become very, very important. Once the attack is underway and you've identified it, you want to be able to eradicate that particular attack if something is left in your network, and then recover from that attack. And then finally, you would want to go to lessons learned and find out, how did this happen? What could we do better next time? There's always something you could do to make things better. So hopefully that'll be something you spend some time with as you're going through the incident response process. That's from section 5.4 of the exam objectives. I have a video on this called, amazingly enough, Incident Response Process. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, then I will be glad to send you an email that says you must have watched this because you followed these instructions exactly. You're going to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, I want you to put your name and your email address. I will be emailing this back to you, so it's important that that email address is correct. In the subject line, you could be nice enough to put that this is the October 2019 Security Plus Study Group. And if you wanted to put the super secret code word of the month right there into that subject line, it would help me a lot. Let's make the super secret code word identification. Make it easy. I was going to mix it up, but I decided not to. Identification is our super secret code word of the month. You could also put information into the body or the text of that message. I read through all of these. If you're going to spend the time to write a message there, I'm going to spend the time to read it. I'm not always able to respond to everybody's message, but I absolutely do read every single thing you send to me. Every single time I go to either the ones coming directly to me or the messages left on those other systems like Facebook and Reddit and other places as well. So feel free to put anything else in there along with it. So again, go to the top or the bottom, Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, mention this is the October 2019 Security Plus Study Group, and put the super secret code word of identification into that list. Let's do some more questions. I've got more questions waiting here for you. Let's see if any of these are going to be a little more difficult for you. The question asks, an application developer has included the public key of a server as part of their app. Which of these would best describe this technique? An application developer has included the public key of a server as part of their app. Which of these would best describe this technique? Is that stapling, escrow, stretching, hashing, or pinning? All 5 of these things, by the way, are real things. I didn't make up any words here. And you need to know what all 5 of these are if you don't, by the way. So make a note if any of these look funny to you. Is it stapling, escrow, stretching, hashing, or pinning? Those are your 5 different options. This application developer, including the public key of the server as part of their app. Maybe you know what the answer is. If you do, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. You knew it would come back to public keys, didn't you? We always eventually get back to cryptography. So maybe this is one that can help you. Dealing with keys. Key management. It can be a significant challenge. If you're a large organization with a lot of systems and a lot of servers, it can be a relatively complex configuration. PKI is incredibly important to have your arms around, have a solid plan in place to know exactly how to handle this, because it can get out of hand very quickly. It's not something you just want to, whenever somebody shows up and says, hey, I need a certificate. Okay, let's make one. There should already be a process in place well before that. You don't want to do that on the fly. It will never work out for you. So feel free to think about what you need. And if your organization has not created one of those plans, make sure you have something in place. It's interesting because once you get into cryptography, and some of the people in the chat room talking about this, the cryptography aspect of this seems like it would be complicated. But once you start working with it, not so bad. That's one of the great things you may want to try. It's very easy to set up your own lab, become your own certificate authority, create some certificates, put it on your own web server, see if it works. You can do that. That's a lab. That'd be an easy one to do. And that might help you understand more about these technologies and how they work. I think doing that makes a lot of sense, working through those. So the application, let's see how we did on this one. The application developer has included the public key of a server as part of the app. Which of these would best describe this technique? We're kind of all over the place on this one. We almost hit a majority. 46% of you say it's pinning. 26% of you say it's stapling. They sound like the same thing, but they are different. 16% of you say it's hashing. 9% say it's escrow, and only 2% say it's stretching. A real thing, by the way. Not making these up. Those are real terms. They're all in your exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with those. So which one would this be? These application developers, if they're putting the certificate in the app itself, then you absolutely are doing some pinning. This is where the developer wants to be sure that the application, when it's talking to the server, is really talking directly to the server. It is able to know there's no proxying going in the middle. And if you're somebody who's doing SSL decryption, where you are effectively proxying the decryption on one end, and then you're creating a new encrypted communication on the other, you're effectively proxying it in the middle, which is a completely legitimate form of analysis of data. Many firewalls will do SSL decryption, but if the app is expecting the server's public key, it's the server's certificate, and it suddenly gets a certificate from some device in the middle that's doing SSL decryption, the application can then decide, I'm not going to keep going with this. It might say, sorry, the application's not going to run now. Kind of the opposite of what we were talking about before when the application developers didn't care. This is the polar opposite of that, where the application developer is very, very concerned about talking directly to the server. So if you're using, for instance, a Twitter app on your mobile device, that Twitter app has a pinned certificate inside of it, and it will not allow a man in the middle or an SSL decryption right in the middle of that. It says, sorry, we're not going to let that happen. I want to see the certificate from the server show up. That is called certificate pinning, and it's a pretty important one to be able to have in your application. So those of you that answered, the 49% of you, almost half of you, said it was pinning. That is the right answer. Have that there. Now, these other technologies are useful too. Certificate stapling is a method of adding the validation of the certificate as part of the SSL handshake when you initially talk to the server. Instead of having to go all the way back to the certificate authority and verify the certificate, instead the server itself can verify the certificate with a digitally signed notice from the CA that says, nope, this is a good certificate. You can trust it. Key escrow is when a third party is holding your decryption keys. Maybe you have a third party that's holding some of the keys or all of the keys. And if you ever need access, you go to the key escrow holder to be able to get those keys. Hashing is, well, we know about hashing, as we were just talking about that earlier, where we're able to create some type of fixed length output based on some type of input. And then 2% of you said stretching. Key stretching is a way to take a small key and maybe use it multiple times, effectively stretching it and making it much more powerful than it is all by itself. In our particular question, though, we wanted to know about how those apps were working, and pinning is the right way to work through that. Well, we've got time for another question, so let's do another multiple choice question and see if we can bounce back from this one. The next question on our list asks, which of these threat actors often gain access to remote systems without any sophisticated knowledge of exploits or attacks? Which of these threat actors often gain access to remote systems without any sophisticated knowledge of exploits or attacks? Now, I've got a few of these listed in here. We have a hacktivist, we have nation state, we have insider, we have script kiddie, we have competitor. So those are 5 valid threat actors that you do need to know about from your exam objectives. Make sure you know all 5 of these. If any of these look unusual or you're not sure exactly what they are, make sure you're familiar with them. So the possible answers for these are hacktivist, nation state, insider, script kiddie, and competitor. Those are the ones you need to know. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock it in. See if you do know the answer. See if you really know the answer. I think some of us might know the answer on this one. Hopefully, you'll be familiar with this. These are all 5 of these, by the way, that are listed. All 5 are real things. Didn't make any of them up. All 5 of these are on your exam objectives. Did not make any of those up. So make sure you're familiar with these and working through them. Are these questions roughly what you'll be seeing on the exam? No, these are not exam questions. These are study group questions. These are questions to see if you understand the underlying technologies that are presented in the exam. And then from there, you can work towards understanding the more complex questions that are asked on the exam. But if you don't know this part, you couldn't possibly get to the next part where you have to understand what's asked on the exam. The Security Plus exam is a pretty tough one. That is an exam that is intense. Those questions take multiples of the things we're learning here and combine them all into a single question and expect you to know the answer of those. So that is what we do have to know. Let's see how we did on this one. How did we do? Well, we can see 68% say a script kiddie, 23% say an insider, 6% said hacktivist, 2% said competitor, and 1% said nation state. Well, we'll go with the majority. I wouldn't say it's a vast majority, but certainly well over 50%. 68% of you say that it's a script kiddie. And if you're looking for an attack that has no sophistication, no understanding of what they're doing, no real knowledge of what's happening behind the scenes, it's simply someone running a script and hoping for the best, that's a script kiddie. Now, the term is really trying to demonstrate that the person doing this is perhaps an adolescent in their mind, but perhaps not one in reality. You can be a 50-year-old script kiddie very easily. You know nothing that's going on. You're just running a script and hoping for the best. Interestingly, script kiddies can come from anywhere. They could be inside your network. They could be outside your network. You never know where they're coming from, but the attacks themselves are not sophisticated at all. If the script that's running suddenly stops working because it hit a corner case or something wasn't quite right, you can bet the script kiddie won't know what to do next. So that's one of those things. Now, in the chat room, some people are making the point, but aren't we all script kiddies to some degree? Or perhaps. I think we're all learning, right? But I don't think we're the people that are learning their Security Plus, I would bet, are a little further along than the script kiddies. But these folks have egos. They want to get in. They're just trying to find some way in the door, but they are not sophisticated at all. They're using a battering ram to get through a door that probably all you really had to do was turn the doorknob and push. The script kiddies are not really going to help very much there. Well, and you can see a lot of you already knew that. 69% of you said, yep, that's script kiddie. We know about those guys. And if you are not familiar with the other types of actors that are in this list, you do need to know them. And it's not the full list. The full list of all of these threat actors is in the Security Plus exam objectives. Make sure that you have these exam objectives. They will tell you everything you need to know for the exam. They give detailed information about what's in the exam. You can find those at professormesser.com/objectives or simply Google CompTIA exam objectives. This is a fabulous resource, by the way. This is free. It's the first thing you should grab when you start your studies. It's the last thing you should reference before you finally book that exam to see if you really have learned everything. People ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm really ready to take the exam? Well, the first thing you need to know is go through this exam objectives. So that's the first thing I say. Have you done it? What things do I need to know? It's in the exam objectives. They are all there under professormesser.com/objectives. We'll find it all there for you. Well, can you believe we hit an hour already of the study group? But we have another one showing up in November. Don't worry. Right now, the schedule for this one in November is November the 20th, the third Wednesday of the month of November. I know our friends in Canada just had their Thanksgiving. This is the one that occurs about a week before our Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So this is one where hopefully we'll be winding down, except for the folks that are in retail. I'm so sorry. I've been on those networks with those folks in IT when it is time, when it's time and the holidays are here, and it's a little crazy for them. So we have some solidarity with them, and we wish them the best. November 20th, come back. We'll have another Security Plus study group. Of course, we do other study groups during the month. On November 5th and November 7th, we do A+ 1001 and 1002 study groups, respectively. And then on the 13th, We do a Network Plus study group. There's always something. And of course, all of the study groups are available on my website for replay. You can go through every single one of them. And of course, if this is well after November the 20th, you can find out when the next event's going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. Well, stick around for the next hour. I'm going to turn this boat around so that you're asking me the questions instead of me asking you the questions. So we'll do that in a moment. I'll open up the phone lines. But in the meantime, I'll remind you my Security Plus course notes can be found on my website on those pull-down links or from the homepage, or by simply going to professormesser.com/securitycn for security course notes. My practice exams, brand new practice exams, been out about a month. They're right there at professormesser.com/securitype for practice exams. Don't forget about all those great social media sites. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Instagram. And don't forget about /Amazon. That does help us a lot. And we do appreciate you buying your books and your other study materials right there at professormesser.com/Amazon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Stick around for the next hour. But if you do have to leave, we hope you come back. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. The next A+ certification study group, that's a good question. Let's find out when that is. I have it. It's at professormesser.com/calendar. We just did that. But it is on the 5th and the 7th of November. One is the Tuesday, the 5th is the 1001. Thursday, the 7th is the 1002. So that's there. Is my book in Amazon? It is not. I don't have any plans to publish on Amazon at the moment, so sorry. Just did not make a lot of sense for this particular implementation. So nice book, though. Fantastic. Softback book. Well bound. High quality. A lot of good detail in there, too. It's the questions I wish I had when I was studying for my Security Plus. The course notes are different. So these are two different things. So if you need notes, get the course notes. If you need practice exams, get the practice exam book. Two different things. Although if you go to the sales page and you go to buy it, there is a link there where you can get both at the same time. So I think a lot of people may need that for having those there. Let's get the phone lines open, and then we'll answer more questions that are coming up. Let's see if I can get my Skype up and running and get the call-in section going. Got to get my own studio up and running here with my own shows. And I'll call in and then tell you how to call in. This will take just a moment as I call in to my own show. I have to start her up. Have to call in on my Skype. It'll make a noise here as we are doing that. I got to find the button to be able to call. There we go. There we go. And I type a thing into this particular screen, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, that doesn't make sense, but I'll do it anyway. And she says,
welcome.
See, it all works. I like that when that happens. So you can also call in to the show. You can call in by picking up your phone and calling us at 855-785-RJ45. That number west of the Rockies is 855-785-7545. All of those, by the way, those phone numbers, toll-free in the continental United States. There's also a way you can call me for free if you are not in the continental U.S. A lot of folks that are on the stream are from outside the U.S. You can call in using Skype for free because Skype doesn't require any Skype minutes if you are calling on a toll-free number. So you can use Skype for free by putting a +1 at the beginning. Call the number on the screen, +1 855-785-7545. So that's the way that works, being able to work through it. The updates to the exam. Yes, the exam, Security Plus, came out October of 2017. So it's been out about 2 years now. We expect this version of the Security Plus exam to probably be out another year and a half. So for those of you wondering if we're getting those, if we're working with those, if we're trying to study for our exam, is it worth studying right now? Yes. You're not going to see another updated version of this exam for a really long time now. So that will be something to consider as you are trying to figure out, should I study for this? Should I not study for this? Now's a perfect time to study for this. It's not going anywhere. Everything that says SY0501 are all the right resources to use. Don't use one that has a different number. SY0501 is the number that you want to be able to use on that. So make sure you're familiar with those. Well, we do have a caller. Let me make sure I've got my lines set up here so we can talk to this caller from the 240 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you on mute? I hear something.
Hi, Professor Mentor.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Henry, and I'm calling from D.C.
All right. Thanks, Henry. What can we do for you?
So I had a question about the elasticity and scalability. I was trying to find the difference between the two because it kind of sounds like I'm still a little bit confused, and I've been searching online, and I found some Stack Overflow, and then they list some things that is kind of like confusing. So I just wanted for you to actually explain them more in detail. And by the way, I wanted to say thank you so much for all the hard work that you do for us here trying to get the certification.
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to do it. I appreciate your watching the videos and helping support what we do here. The two terms, as you've already mentioned, are closely intertwined with each other. We're talking specifically about the elasticity, which is what we just talked about, and scalability, which is similar but not quite the same thing. A system that is scalable is one that we have built to be able to handle heavy loads when they come in. We were talking earlier about the folks that are in retail have spent all year building out systems to be scalable so that whenever they need to be able to make this system really react and really handle a load, they've either got an enormous amount of resources sitting there ready and able to take the load that's going to come by, or they're a little smarter about it and they use the elasticity aspects of the cloud to be able to build out the systems as they need it and then scale it back down as things get quieter after the beginning of the year. So it's really a concept that is closely intertwined, but just because something is scalable does not necessarily mean that it is elastic. Is scalable. I could build out on my web servers. I have a number of web servers behind a load balancer right now. I have a lot of unused capacity because just the way that the cloud-based system that I use, I like to have these multiple servers there for redundancy. I want to throw in yet another word into this is the redundant piece of it. So I have multiple servers running. They're all running at a very low utilization. But I'm running multiple servers in case one server fails for some reason. I have a redundant server running. So that means I'm also very scalable. I have it set up so that if suddenly I have a bunch of people during a live study group show up, that it's able to handle the load. Now, when all these people go away after the study group, I've still got multiple servers there. They don't shrink back into a former format. So I am in no way elastic at all in my current configuration. I could set it up to be more elastic, but I like having the redundancy there. So all these things sort of, they fit together like a puzzle, but they are different aspects of being able to keep all of these things running and being able to handle the loads coming in. Does that make any sense, Henry?
Yeah, it's getting better. The only reason why I was able to get the answer correct was because I saw the word scale on the question. So I was like, if it's talking about scale, I should pick elasticity instead. And then I still got it right, but the thing is, like, I'm still confused as to like how to differentiate them when I looked at a question.
To really do it, it's easier for old people like me because before there was cloud computing, we didn't have much elasticity available. We had to buy physical computers, and if we wanted redundancy in those physical computers and the ability to scale, then we needed to build out these large blocks of multiple servers running multiple web operating systems and being able to have many people hitting those browsers at one time. In fact, I worked with a very large media company, and in their data center, they would have one of those big, large racks, and they had 8 different web servers in the rack with a load balancer. In fact, it was during the days, if you ever worked with early versions of Microsoft's Internet Information System, the IIS, that is the web server software that runs on Windows Server, it was not the most reliable of web server software. There were all kinds of different problems they would run into. And so what they did is they had these 8 servers running, and every hour they would reboot a server. They would just go down the line and reboot a server every time so that all of their systems would be running as well as they could whenever. Now, all of these systems weren't being hit at 100%, but they needed some type of scalability so that suddenly if everybody hit all at once, they'd be able to handle the load. But because they were physical servers, you couldn't realistically have somebody sitting in the data center and you call them on the phone, yeah, it's getting late. Why don't you take 4 of those out of the rack? Just power them off or unplug them and pull them out of the rack and set them down. Tomorrow morning at 8, put them back in the rack, turn them on so that we can be elastic. You're going to be our elasticity. We didn't do that. We didn't have that flexibility. It was really the advent of the cloud computing that allowed us to have this orchestration, the automation. We were able to be much more elastic and not have to keep these systems running all the time with no elasticity, but plenty of scalability.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. I have another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I am not 100% familiar with the firewall's permission or access control list logs, and I have seen some of the practice questions that I've found online about identifying what is happening in a certain situation. Like maybe they give you a list with codes in there, and like I do have some programming background, but I don't know all the syntax of all the languages and different languages, as well as not very 100% familiar with Linux and those type of things. So I'm trying to see how and where I can find this information, because I watch all your videos online and I haven't found anything that actually talks about these types of questions that would come up and identify like what is happening in a certain situation when they give you an output.
This is probably one of the biggest questions I see online, and I will straighten out for you how you should get ready for this. I'm going to first bring up the exam objectives. So other people listening in are probably wondering, what in the world are you talking about with this? There is a section of the exam objectives, section 2.4. See if I can get this up on the screen here so that folks can see it. Section 2.4 says, given a scenario, analyze and interpret output from security technologies. And then they have all these different devices, antivirus, host-based firewall, patch management, UTM, data execution prevention, web application firewall. And there's some other sections of this that also go into some detail about reading logs. And that's another section that's a little different, but kind of similar to be able to understand what's happening on the network. We were talking about some of that earlier, being able to read through an IPS to be able to know what's going on the network. The one thing that I have seen almost universally online is that the sample questions that try to address these particular exam objectives go way outside the scope of what CompTIA is looking for on the exam. The exam is much more straightforward. It does not expect you to understand particular programming languages. It does not expect you to understand a very specific type of attack and name what that attack was. Oh, that was the I Love You attack. That was the Black Friday attack. No, it doesn't. You don't have to know that level of detail, fortunately, on the exam. But there are some things that are very indicative of different types of attacks. If you go back to section 1 of the exam objective, there's a bunch of different kinds of attacks listed there, tons of attacks. And so I'll give you a good example of one is a SQL injection. So there are injection attacks listed on the exam objectives. SQL injection has a very specific style to that type of attack. There's certain characters and syntax that you always seem to see with SQL injection attacks. So if you happen to see those characters and that syntax in a big log of things, you should automatically know, oh, that's a SQL injection. There's very common things that you will see associated with that. You are in no way expected to understand or know what C++ syntax is like, how to break out Perl or Python, how to understand the nuances of PowerShell. All you have to know is very broadly, what do these types of attacks look like? And in my videos, I actually go through some of these attacks. I do a SQL injection and we see it on the screen. As long as you are seeing what I'm typing in, you say, oh, he's putting the apostrophe 1 equals 1, apostrophe insert from, an apostrophe select from. That's what you would expect to see in SQL injection. That's it. That's what CompTIA is looking for, that type of thing. Now, obviously, there's other types of attacks that may come through as well. And attacks, there's a huge list on here of different types of attacks. So make sure you are familiar with those and what you would run into. But don't, I've seen some of these sample questions, and it's expecting me to understand C++ and the functions and what? No, you don't have to. You do not have to read source code and know if this source code has some type of vulnerability inside of it. Nope. You're way too far in the weeds. Get much farther out of the weeds, and you're going to be just fine.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate the call.
Thank you so much, Professor. I appreciate it.
Take care. That's one that the part of the problem with that is perfectly reasonable. Henry has a perfectly good point that they don't give you a lot of guidance. The exam objectives just at a very high level say, yeah, you need to recognize this. Well, what do you mean recognize it? So fortunately now we know what the exam looks like. Some of us have taken the exam. Some of us know what type of questions are coming. So we can at least give you a little bit of guidance along the way. Will the exam change? We don't know. Maybe it will. But as it stands now, you don't have to know any programming languages, thankfully. Thankfully for me, I don't have to know any programming languages. So I'm pretty happy about that. Let's go back to the phone call. Thanks for holding. 901 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. It's Angela from Memphis, Tennessee.
Hello, Angela. Thank you for calling. I've been in Memphis a number of times. Missed that place. What can we do for you?
Hey, well, thank you so much for all that you do. You provide excellent content, and it's helped me on my IT journey.
Great.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I'm here in Memphis. I am a help desk manager, and I love what I do. But I've got a knack for cybersecurity. It's just something I've been interested in. So I don't know if this is the best thing, but I went ahead and I was able to make it to a help desk manager role, and I skipped A+, skipped Network Plus. This experience and leadership skills got me there.
Yep.
So I got a question. I was given an opportunity to take the 501 exam, and I've got a voucher that's expiring soon. I've been studying ever since I received word that I would be given this voucher, and I've been studying, but I don't feel quite ready yet. The voucher expires around Christmas of this year, around December 25th. So I'm 2 months in. I am going through the videos. I'm reading books. I'm supplementing that with flashcards. But I kind of want to accelerate my learning. Do you have any recommendations? And when I say accelerated, I'd like an opportunity to get some hands-on experience. And you've probably got this question so many times. But what should I do to just increase the likelihood that I'll pass this exam on the first shot, given the fact that I didn't go Network Plus, I didn't go A+?
Well, at least you recognize that there's a fundamental part to Security Plus that makes it a little bit harder if you don't have that networking foundation. I wouldn't say necessarily the A+ foundation, but certainly Network Plus gives you a good chunk of the foundational content that you would use in Security Plus, but that's okay. There are plenty of people that come to my site, and Security Plus is the first certification they get. When I was taking my A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, I took it in that reverse order. I took Security Plus first, then I took Network Plus, then I took A+. And a lot of people do that because the federal government, folks in D.C. and Virginia and Maryland, and a lot of them are on this stream right now, they work in an area where Security Plus is kind of the entry level for their particular jobs in their neck of the woods. So they don't even look at Network Plus and A Plus. Now, is that going to require you to work a little harder on Security Plus? Yes, it is, because there's things you don't miss. Now, fortunately, you don't have to study a lot to be able to catch up. There's not like you're missing a month worth of data. You're just behind by a few study sessions, and you'll be able to catch up. The real challenge I have on Security Plus is that it's a complex exam that pulls in on each question. It seems to pull in from multiple parts of the exam to be able to answer the final question. So it's almost like every question has a particular focus that is coming from different parts of the exam. So you have to know twice as much to be able to answer a question. But they're not insurmountable. Some of the questions are relatively complex. Some of them are gimmies on the exam. Not a lot of trivia, though, on the Security Plus exam. And I'll mention, because I don't know if I've mentioned this on this study group yet, but there's always 4 things I always tell people they have to have. And you mentioned one of them, rightly so. You need a good book. You need some videos. You need some Q&A, and you need some hands-on. So at your point, you're already kind of getting through the book and the video part. And as you've mentioned, you're already noticing that you need some hands-on. There's just no way around it to be able to do this. One of the things I mentioned on the last study group, and I think it applies to many people, is one of the best ways to learn these technologies is to do them yourself. And we were talking earlier about creating certificates. I mentioned that you could build your own server, whether it's Linux or Windows. Microsoft Windows makes this really easy. You'll build out Windows Server. Windows Server has a certificate manager you can install. You become your own CA, and now you start handing out certificates. In fact, on that same machine, you could load up Microsoft's web server. You could then create a certificate on your newly created company CA and put it on the web server and see if you're able to connect to it over an encrypted channel. That's a perfectly valid and useful lab that you would do. On the last study group, we had someone call in who had built a home lab all in virtual machines where he got pfSense. That's a open source firewall, pfSense, and he was able to integrate that with Snort, which is intrusion prevention, intrusion protection, and able to plug that into his network and watch actual traffic go by and be able to start setting up firewall rules to allow or block certain traffic from his network. So he was able to sit at his desk, he was able to surf, and then he created a firewall rule, and suddenly he can't surf there anymore. Those are the types of things that become really useful because now you're accustomed to adding a firewall rule. You sort of see what firewall rules consist of. You can apply some of those rules to see if it blocks actual traffic. You can look through the logs of your firewall, which, by the way, will show you things you never knew were on your network. And then you're able to look for vulnerabilities and see if you can find those and stop them with your intrusion prevention. There are ready-to-run virtual machines with pfSense and Snort already running on them. A lot of the screenshots and the logs that I have in my course came directly from one of those VMs that I just downloaded, turned it on, and suddenly I had data that I could pull from to show you. You could do it just as easily, and there's plenty of how-tos out there. That would be another great thing to do from a security perspective. And of course, you have all those command lines and other things that you could run on the Security Plus exam, and anyone's machine is able to run those so that you're able to get a feel for the networking side of things, because you could be asked questions about that on the exam as well. I think you've got the right perspective and the right direction of what you want to do. Just start a little step at a time. It's an afternoon. It's a day out of your weekend. Loading up pfSense, running it in a virtual machine. It's not going to work right out of the gate. And to be fair, you really don't want it to. The part where you're really going to learn is the part where suddenly you figure out how to fix the problem. Oh, well, that's how it works. Oh, that's how I get to the front screen. Oh, that's how, what's the login? I mean, even simple things. How do you log into this thing? Those are the things that get you remembering more about the technology and how it works. And I think that's an important part, probably more so than the A+ and Network Plus. Hands-on is so important on the Security Plus.
Thank you so much. I'm going to look into that, and I'll give it a go. Thank you, Professor Messer.
Thanks, Angela. Best of luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's that's always fun to do too. I find doing labs is great. That you always learn something in a lab. When I was working at a firewall company, I was a systems engineer there. I would go out and show people this technology. Doing a live demonstration is one thing, but before we ever went on site and showed a customer this technology, we always would get together with all the other SEs. We would spend a week doing training on these things, and we would have enormous labs set up where we had all our firewalls in place, and we would run all kinds of traffic through it. What if we did this? What if we did that? What if we connected these together? What if we ran this type of traffic through? What if we changed this rule? And it was great labbing experience. We weren't working towards a certification. We were trying to learn more about the technology and what it could do and what it couldn't do. Those are things you can do just as easily in your own environment with your own firewalls that you can download from the internet. And it really does help you on the Security Plus exam. It helps you on the ACL section where you have to really understand and read through a firewall rule. I'll give you a little insider scoop on it's kind of the practice exams book. I have a firewall rule set, and I ask you questions about the rule set. How would you prevent this? What rule prevents this traffic from going through? Is this traffic allowed through or not? So you have to read through the firewall rules to be able to do that. And I also have the same thing with logs. I have firewall logs and other logs in these questions and answers, and I ask you questions about it. What does this log mean? Which of these things is associated with the log that's listed above? And then you have to interpret what's in the log. It's not that complicated, but it does require you have a knowledge of what is in a firewall log. What type of things would you expect to see? What is, do you have IP addresses, port numbers? How do you know what IP address is associated with what port number and what direction it's going? And how do you know what happened? What's the disposition of that particular flow through the firewall? Those are the things you need to know perhaps the most. And one lab, load up pfSense and run that on your network. You now have everything you need to know to answer those questions. Back to the phone lines. Thanks for holding 559. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, it's George here. I'm calling from the UK.
Hey, George.
I've got a question for you about what kind of job recommendations that you'd kind of support for someone that's in a kind of help desk management role that wants to get into information security. What kind of options are there, and what would you recommend as the next step?
This is a bit of a fluid conversation. There were a few people talking about this on Reddit. I was reading last night or this morning something about people who are wanting to get into security and wondering about how the job market was right now. I think IT security, some people were speculating or postulating that perhaps IT security was getting a little bit full now, that we were hitting a point where it's becoming too saturated. It's hard to find jobs. And I disagreed with that 1,000,000,000%. Even when I got out of the direct IT security market, when I worked as a systems engineer, there were open positions everywhere. This was about 4 years ago. So this is not a lifetime ago. If anything, IT security has just exploded since then. There's so many jobs that have suddenly now been created since I was doing IT security. And even then, we didn't have enough people to fit in all these positions. The argument people were making online is that you have all these companies and all these universities, and they're putting out these IT security graduates now. But the reality is the cybersecurity graduates that are coming out really don't know much more than what a help desk was giving them. A lot of these. Some universities have figured it out. Some schools have figured out cybersecurity. The vast majority have not. So it's not quite the skilled workforce that I think some people think is hitting the market. And even then, if all of them got jobs, there would still be jobs available in security right now. Just a massive number of those available. It's a great market. My pathway into it and the path that I saw many people use to get into security was through networking. And it just made sense. When you deal with IT security, a huge foundation of your job is network. It's about implementing these technologies on the network. It's about understanding the protocols that are going over the network. It's about being able to integrate switches and routers and routing protocols into the security technologies that you currently have. It's pretty specific. Almost everything you do in IT security has some type of networking component. And that's why I've mentioned on other study groups that if you can get through networking and become an expert in networking, I don't mean that you know networks, that you got the Network Plus or you got the CCNA routing and switching. I want you to be able to design networks, to be able to understand the nuances of these networks and the technologies in use, and be able to put them together in a large-scale environment. If you can become expert in at least an aspect of that, you would be well positioned to move into security because you're effectively layering on the security part right on top of that. Because then you can step into a firewall configuration and build out the network address translation that is then going across an IPsec VPN to another location. It's a route-based IPsec VPN, so traffic is only going to go across that link if you have your routing table configured properly in the firewall to be able to send the traffic out to that remote location. So all of those things I just mentioned, except for IPsec, all of those other things were networking things. So when people say, how can I get into security? Perhaps they don't expect me to say, oh, you need to get into networking, but I think that is what positions you best to get there. It also helps that networking pays nicely, so it's a nice move up. If you're at a help desk, a networking is a very good move up the ladder, and then from there, security would be a nice move up the ladder from there, in my opinion. One thing that also I'm finding, though, is that there are more and more entry-level security jobs coming out because we don't have enough people. So you might find an opportunity to you may be currently in a help desk. Your organization may be very large. You may have a security operations center, a SOC, we call them. And that security operations center may need somebody with good frontline skills to be the tier 1 or tier 2, and you can move into the SOC knowing the skill set that you currently have, and then learn the security plus or the security aspect of things as you go. Another move up might be a network operations center or a network administration role. That might get you out of the help desk and then moving up the ladder from there. I think all of those would be a good direction to go. It may not be the next step for you, may not be security, but you can certainly position yourself so that you're moving into that role as you move up that ladder.
Great. Okay. Thank you. The company I work with you might know, it's an American company, BMC.
Sure.
They do a product called Discovery.
Okay.
So there's an opportunity within the company to learn that product and kind of go that route. So I think, do you think that would be a good first step on the way to security and information security?
That would be a great step, because now you're getting that foundational knowledge you need to have the skill set of understanding what's going on, what is happening at the protocol level, the network level. Even if you're not configuring a router or configuring a switch, that's coming. You'll get there eventually. But knowing what's happening on the wire and having that foundational knowledge is going to help you not only with that role that you're in, that will help you throughout your entire career, wherever it takes you.
Awesome. I just want to echo everyone else is saying as well. Your courses and stuff are excellent. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, George. I appreciate it. Best of luck.
Cheers, buddy.
That's fantastic. It's one of those things where you almost can't go wrong in IT. It will pull you along, and you never know the things that you're learning, the things you're going through, the struggles that you're in the middle of trying to get a particular system to work properly, or it's always crashing and it's a high stress environment and you're on call and you're having to wake up crazy hours, and you never know exactly what that does for you later. Only later do you look back and go, that was actually some good stuff, because I can use that now, and now I'm in a better position, and now I'm making more money, and now my family's happier, and I don't have to get a divorce. See how that works out? Boy, I took us on a weird path there, didn't I? Let's talk to 720 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. I see a caller 720. It's a Colorado area code. Hello, caller. Are you there? You may be on mute. You may want to unmute yourself. I know. Wait, what? What was I talking about? I've seen it happen too often. It's kind of scary when that happens. I heard a click. Are you there, caller? Hey, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's James. I'm calling from London.
Hey, James. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I wonder if you can. I've recently downloaded your practice exams. Are they the newer ones you were talking about that you've got with the book there?
Right. Those are, in fact, they were released like a couple of weeks ago, so brand new.
Oh, okay, brilliant. So they're sort of more like the exam questions then, would you say?
Oh, I specifically wrote them to have the same feel, the same cadence, the same voice as the exam questions. I really tried to mirror the type of, in some cases, weird language that they use on the exam. It turned out not to be too bad. The actual Security Plus exam, I would say, is better in its writing than some of the other exams like A+. I don't think A+ is so well written, but Security Plus seems to be. But the questions are complex. Some of them are really challenging, and I tried to take the same complexities and difficulty levels and put them into this book.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Sort of building on that, then, I mean, I'm doing pretty well with it at the moment. The only thing that I seem to struggle with more often than not is the performance-based questions. Not so much the firewall stuff or the ones where you have to drop. Well, there's different types of them, I suppose. But for example, on one of them, you've got the ones where you've got a desktop with browser-based front end, for example, and a tablet for field sales. So sometimes I find answers that may be applicable to both of those things. How do you look at those questions and tackle them? What would be the best way to sort of tackle those questions?
There are some vagaries. The questions themselves have not a direct, specific, solid answer on some of these, and I actually tried to emulate that as well. I tried to make questions that were a little bit more fuzzy around the edges, but still fit along with, you could still look at it and say, no, once you've laid everything out, this is the place it has to go. And I tried to get that across in the explanation for the performance-based questions on why I chose that particular answer for that particular part of the question. Because the Security Plus exam does the same thing. They tend to take one specific characteristic of one specific technology, and that's the one they focus on for that question, even though the technology is a much broader technology. It was hard to emulate in the list of questions, and as you have seen, as you go through it, you almost tell yourself, well, I could have gone either way with that one. I could have chose this one or this one. I think it would have fit. And the problem, it probably might have, but I tried to weight the answers with the same logic that CompTIA uses. Performance-based questions are a bit of a challenge because they're not straightforward. They're sometimes very broad, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's easy to construct a question with a set of answers that doesn't fit together, and the puzzle doesn't quite, the pieces don't fit exactly the way you were expecting, and you're putting them together thinking, this puzzle, these two pieces, they sort of go together, but there seems to be a little gap in there. Well, on the exam, there is a little bit of a gap. It's just not quite as solidly a puzzle as you would expect. And I know which question you're referring to and trying to figure those out. That was one that does have a same feel and the same style as the CompTIA exam. And it is probably as frustrating for me to write and put into the book as it probably is for you to finally read through this. And at the end, when you're reading the answers, hitting yourself over the head and wondering, why did you write a question like this? You're making us mad. You're making us crazy. And I am, but that's what the exam expects. And I'd rather you be mad and crazy now before you walk into the exam and then be perfectly comfortable with that level of idiocy.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. No, they're actually really, really useful because, I mean, I tried to find a lot of content online, and, they were just very basic questions that didn't really go into the depth that you've gone into on the exam tests here that I look at. So I'm actually really glad I went down that route and got these, to be honest with you.
I saw the same thing.
It's the stuff that you find.
Stuff online, sort of, you're never quite sure exactly what you're going to get. Some of the things I've seen online for sale other places are really good. Some are not good at all. I've seen a lot of questions that are trivial type questions that are asking questions. What device forwards traffic by MAC address? Well, then you're not going to get a question like that on Security Plus. As you've already mentioned, they're more complex. There's more layers to it. And you do have to find something to really try it out. Every single one of these questions in the book, though, was originally written. So there's nothing in here that duplicates the exam, but I think you'll have the similar feel to what the exam will present.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, great. James. Best of luck.
Cheers. Thank you.
That's a big challenge on the exam, I think. It's hard to find exam materials that really do match what the expectation is, because you don't know until you walk into the exam, and the people that walked into the exam and took it are contractually obligated to stay quiet. So there has to be a balancing act there somewhere. And I think I was able to find that balancing act for you and present you with completely original content, but one that would really prepare you. So that's one of those. The folks in the chat room are going, are you really looking at the chat? It's right there. That's the YouTube chat. I really am looking at it. And I know I'm not answering questions from that, but I've got all these people on the phones, and then I can always go back to the chat once we get back to the phones. I apologize, because folks like this person at 617 area code have been holding for so long. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What can we do for you?
Okay. Hi, I am taking the exam on Thursday.
All right.
And I was in the practice earlier today, and I also purchased your practice exam, which is fabulous.
Thank you.
I did not feel prepared until going through that and walking through all those questions and knowing the breakdown of what was wrong, what was right, why it was wrong, and watching any videos and follow-up. So thank you so much for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Probably the best $20 investment I've made on this exam preparation.
Great.
Your notes are great too, but that exam is just amazing.
Thank you.
So one thing I noticed during the practice earlier and in the exam is with the performance-based questions, there's a lot of fill in the blank. And one thing I'm a little concerned about, because I don't know how it's graded, are they going to check for typos, or is this an automated kind of grading where I need to make sure I know how to spell everything and double check on that?
It's one of the challenges when writing a book that has performance-based questions is, how do you make a performance-based question in a book act the way that it's going to act on your exam? And the quick answer is I can't. There's no way to do that. But what you will find on the exam is there's a lot of questions that are drag and drop, and I tried to emulate at least the style of that, more of a matching question when you're looking at it on a piece of paper. And I do have some fill in the blank in the book. The reality of the exam is at least the Security Plus, I want to say, and don't take me at 100%, I don't know if there are any fill in the blank on Security Plus. Those of you that have taken the older Linux Plus prior to this latest version, there were a lot of fill in the blank. I don't think there's a lot of fill in the blank on Security Plus. So don't worry so much about the spelling or the fill in the blank part. Not going to be a concern. Most of this will be a drag and drop. It will be a matching. It will be putting things in a particular order. It will be clicking from a pull-down menu and filling in things from a pull-down menu. Fortunately, I'm in the same boat. I'll type badly during the exam. Thankfully, that's not going to be a big deal. So don't worry about that part. The way they grade it, because folks were asking about this earlier, is we don't know how they grade the performance-based questions, because some of these performance-based questions, like the one we did today, there were 4 questions and you needed to pick 4 of those to answer. Well, you could get 3 of them right and 1 of them wrong. Do you get 3/4 credit? We don't know. The CompTIA's frequently asked questions on their website says that some performance-based questions do offer partial credit. And I would like to hope that a question like the one we had today, where the partial credit is very obvious, I'm hoping the partial credit would be given on the exam for something like that. There are some much more complex performance-based questions on the exam that are drag and drop, or you're using pull-down menus. Those would be a little more difficult to grade with partial credit, but they may be doing something like that as well. The best thing I can say for the folks wondering about that is don't worry about it. You have no control over it. Do the best you can on these questions, and you'll just hope at the end of the exam that it turns out okay for all of us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. That's always a big challenge I find on the exam too, is you never know what these performance-based questions are going to be, but the topics on the performance-based questions are all from your exam objectives. So they're not going to throw something you've never seen before. If you know all of the exam objectives, you're going to do fine on the exam regardless of how they ask the question on the exam. So it's just taking one question and combining it. Like today, our performance-based question was really 4 separate questions. It was just all in a matching. So if you think of it that way, you'll be in pretty good shape. Let's see. For the chat room, we'll go to the chat room real quick. Franz has asked 17 times if I am planning to offer a CySA study group, the cybersecurity system administrator certification from CompTIA CySA Plus. I don't have plans for CySA at the moment. I think I know what the next certification will be that I'm working on. Although I say this, I keep changing my mind every 2 weeks. But I don't think it's going to be CySA. I think that we're getting down a funnel that's a little bit too niche for that one. But you never know. I didn't think I would be doing Network Plus or Security Plus study groups either. So, or 2 separate A+ study groups. So those are things that they tend to change depending on where I happen to be in a particular place. Maybe you can convince me that I am wrong, and I am willing to listen to that, to have that there, and all of those pieces. Let's go to the 502 area code. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
The 502 area code.
Oh, I hear myself. So
Hi, I'm Paul. I'm calling from Seattle.
Hi, Paul. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I just had a couple quick questions. I tried watching your 7-second subnetting video, and I couldn't get it. I've watched some videos that were more arithmetic based, doing it quickly for the exam.
Yep.
Is there a good video or a site that you know for that? For completely understanding it? I'm still trying to get a grasp. I think I'm overcomplicating it.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of that 7-second subnetting video, it is a design for subnetting that is completely overdone and designed by someone who gets way neurotic on the exam and way too anxious, and this is my way out. And I completely understand that other people would not want to do it because other people don't have those problems that I do on the exam. And so completely reasonable. And I get people leaving me questions and comments all the time. I would never do this. And I'm like, good. Go find one that works for you, because there's plenty out there that work for you. I see really 2 major methods that people use other than that method to be able to do subnetting. There's one that uses pie charts, because all subnetting is taking a pie and cutting it up into smaller pieces. And I think that's for people who are very visual, that pie chart subnetting, I think that's all you would have to Google to find that one, is a very good way to go about at least a broad understanding of the subnetting piece. I didn't find that it gave me the math that I needed to make subnetting decisions quickly. I think the key to subnetting without using my charts is to really have your powers of 2 down cold And if you've got them down cold and you understand them well and you don't get flustered on the exam like I do, the magic number method is really the method you should do. If you're good at that math and you're solid and nothing's going to phase you on the exam and you got powers of 2 down and it clicks for you, then look up the magic number method. That is probably the method eventually my mind got to. I don't use the 7-second subnetting when I'm not in a certification exam. That's only for exams. When I'm outside of the exam, it's the magic number method if I have to do it in my head. But the reality is everybody who's doing this networking is pulling up their subnet calculator on their mobile phone and doing it that way just for a sanity check, because we're always making mistakes in the field with subnetting. It just is a natural thing with math. So don't think that you have to be perfect, but I think if you're comfortable with the math, magic number may be the way to go.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I do have a programming background. So, yeah, I was Googling those two methods, the pie chart and the magic numbers. You mentioned them. I appreciate that. One more quick question. Is there a ready-made lab? I've got VMware Workstation set up on my computer with Kali Linux because I did pen testing in school. I've got a cybersecurity degree. Is there like a ready-made a lab you can set up in Workstation for preparing you not only just for the firewall access control list, but other aspects of Security Plus?
I don't know of one. It is a common request. When back a few years ago, I worked with a company called GTS Learning. They were about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago, were acquired by CompTIA, but they produced not only a really good book, but they produced a lab book, which was nothing but labs, which I thought was great. And it's labs you could put on your machine and you could run through them. And at one point we were thinking maybe I would make a set of videos that went along with the labs, and it just never happened. And they got acquired and they stopped doing the books, and all of that just disappeared. What I commonly recommend, and it's with a caveat because I've not used them, is there are a number of books on Amazon that are Security Plus labs. I don't know if they're good or not. I don't know if they're bad or not. I just know that they're available. And if people are interested, I have some of them documented and listed out on my website. On the main page of my website, there's a link for Security Plus study recommendations, and it's listed in there. I would love to, if somebody's ever used them, I would love to get more feedback on those, but that would be a good way to do it too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. Best of luck.
Thank you.
That's always good. Whenever you're trying to get that hands-on, it's always the 4 things for me: videos, books, Q&A, and hands-on. There's something about the hands-on piece. There is a synapse that fires when your fingers are doing it and your eyes see it, and there's just something that registers and sticks it in your brain. Don't skip over that part. There are plenty of things you could do from a lab perspective. And many of I didn't mention it, but many of the Security Plus books, just the books themselves, the textbooks, will often have questions in it, but they also have labs in them as well. If you find the book that has the labs in it, that might help too. So there's some different options you can go through to be able to do that. Let's go back to the phone calls. 201. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there?
Hello?
Hey, hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Austin, calling from New Jersey.
Oh, thanks, Austin. What can we do for you?
Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm actually a 20-year plus Windows administration engineer. Started all the way from NT4. But for 18 years, I worked for a company that wasn't that big to have things like PKI and so on going on. So recently I decided to move into cybersecurity, and I took my first exam and I didn't get it. And the next day I went for an interview for cybersecurity and I got the job.
Nice.
So right now I am getting ready to take the exam again. And I have so many materials, and sometimes I'm confused. I bought your questions for Security Plus. I did the A, B, and C exams before I went for my test, but I don't think I was really prepared enough. I had some books and some other videos. So now I went to some other videos that I'm doing, trying to see if I can get myself ready enough to go back and take the exam. I don't know if there's any advice that you have.
First, let me ask if you were how was your mindset going from failing a certification exam and then going into an interview and then getting the job having not passed the exam? This must have been like the valleys and the hills and the ups and the downs.
I think that's how my life is. I mean, things just work out like that for me. Fortunately for me, it was the NICS framework that was what is needed. I needed to have an idea about to bring my my knowledge into the environment. So
great.
It really came out well. I think preparing for the test was also a very good thing for me.
I think it always is. You know, I have taken certification exams and I have failed plenty of certification exams. Everybody does. But as you mentioned, going through it the first time, you learn quite a bit. And whenever you fail at anything, it's a learning experience. I think probably we learn much more when we fail than we ever learn when things go perfectly 100% well. And in fact, with Security Plus, I'm not sure how people are able to pass this exam after spending the time going through the questions that I did and really trying to emulate the exam itself. And coming from a background of someone who worked at what I would consider to be a pretty high level, senior systems engineer, working with some of the newest security technologies in the world, going out to some of the biggest companies in the world and designing and implementing this technology. And then I looked at Security Plus and wonder, how does anybody pass this? Knowing what I know about security, it's a difficult exam. And that's, that sounds bad when I say it like that, but I mean, I've spent a career doing this. I go back to the NT. I got my, my first MCSE during the NT 4.0 days. So I feel you. And I know there's a path there to finally get to where we're going and what we're doing. And we're always learning, and there's always something, and there's always a path of what we're doing. It's a challenge. And I think that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, the practice questions book, because a lot of people were struggling with this exam, and they were saying that I'm studying what's on the exam objectives, and then you walk into the exam and it's like a different set of questions comes up. Even though in reality they are talking to the objectives, it is somehow hidden from you in these questions that they have written. They're really hard questions. And it's not, they're not all that way, but there's enough of them that they are just soul crushing when you're in the exam, trying to figure out what in the world are they talking about? I've never heard of this technology before. Some of them are by design to be that way. Some of them, they may, I think, have written above what they really should have. Nonetheless, that's what the exam is, and that's what we have to go through. I think the answer is just to once you do the videos, once you do the books, and the books are incredibly valuable, and a lot of people say I didn't read through the book, but the books are a wealth of information, because books are. You can fit a huge, heavy, dense amount of information into a book that you could never fit into a video. There are two different kinds of learning materials that teach you in two very different ways. You should not lack one or the other. And of course, you should try to get as much hands-on as you can. But as we've already talked about in this study group, that can sometimes be a challenge to find high-quality materials, or to try to do this on your own is a bit of a challenge as well. Well, that leaves Q&A. And if you really want to see if you're ready to take the exam, then you need good Q&A. That's one of the reasons I wrote this book. I would say there's not a lot of great resources out there for Security Plus Q&A. I would think the ones that people talk about the most on the CompTIA subreddit is a great place to hang out. If you're trying to find where is really the good Q&A, I would recommend you go there, because people are very quick on that forum to say, do not go here, go over here. And they will point you in a direction to where you can get high quality Q&A, especially if you have to pay for it. You do want to be sure you're getting something that's really good, that you are learning and not cheating your way through the exam. And I think those are good ones to go to. That's probably some of your best resources on the CompTIA subreddit.
That's absolutely true. One of that thing was I followed what you normally preach, to go, to skip the performance-based questions and go through the questions and then come back to that. Unfortunately, by the time I came back, I had only 11 minutes to finish, because I had to read I'm not a fast reader, so you really choked me. By the time I came back, I was just throwing every pots and pans to see whatever that sticks. But at the end, I scored 683 out of 750 to pass. And, I don't know. I think I have to do the more of the exam prep questions more, make sure at least I'm scoring between 80 and 90 before I go. And if you have any advice for me in my current job, I'll greatly appreciate it.
The one thing that you hit on there, and I think people aren't aware of this, and I've not even mentioned it on the study group, is the questions on the exam. It's like a novel. You have to read an amazing amount of text just to get to the question part of these. And every bit of what they're telling you, for the most part, is pretty relevant to answering the question that you have in front of you. And I talk all the time about skip over the performance base, get through the multiple choice, come back. And of course, time is always your enemy on this exam. And I would say even worse on Security Plus, because the questions are so verbose. And if you have my book, then you've seen the questions in my book. I made verbose for that very reason. They have this just lots of text to them. Some of them multiple pages of text, as I'm trying to give you the same feel of what you would be faced with on the exam. It's a challenge. So if you're someone like who's having a problem with time management, try to use the time management on my sample exams the same way. They are 90 questions, so it's the maximum you would get for an exam, and try to run through them. Try to get a little better with what you can expect from the cadence. I think you're right. Doing more Q&A is going to be key. Now, in your new position, do you have some security technologies you're working with? Are you working with firewalls or intrusion prevention or antivirus, anti-malware, any of these types of technologies?
Briefly, not that intense. My previous job, I was part of the team that implemented it, but it was a very small group, and we really didn't do a lot because we built the network and implemented it. So I really would say that I do have a beginner's knowledge on it.
Well, then I'd recommend you do what we were discussing earlier. We were talking about getting your own home lab up and running, and this may be a great opportunity for you to grab. You've certainly done in your career, you've done tons with the technology. So putting some VMware or VirtualBox, downloading pfSense, and getting some data running through it is going to help you a lot. Being able to see the firewall rules, being able to allow traffic, block traffic, read through the logs, and maybe even try getting like something like an exploit software. There's tons of different ones you can choose from. So Metasploit would be great to hit and run through the firewall, see if anything shows up in the logs. If you try to use one of the old Microsoft buffer overflows to a Windows server that you haven't patched, all those things, suddenly you can kind of see what's going on. That may be a great place to go. It's all a graphical front end. It's very easy to use pfSense. It's really more about looking at the logs, looking at the rules, getting a feel for what that's like. You just need a high level. You need a 30,000-foot view of that. You don't have to become an expert in pfSense, but it does help when you get on the exam if you've got some familiarity with what they're talking about.
All right. Thank you very much. And one thing I want to say about your prep questions is that for everybody, it actually takes you 90 minutes to complete each of them. I've timed myself, and it takes me exactly 90 minutes to finish it. So I've tested some other ones, and I see myself finishing within 45 minutes, and it's not, doesn't give you the feel like it's supposed to.
Well, great.
Unlike what your notes for me, yeah.
Sounds like I got the right combination. There's a good balance there, I think, and I'm glad it's working for you. Let us know how it goes.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And thanks for what you're doing. And as soon as I get it, I will let you know.
Thank you, sir. Best of luck.
Thanks.
That's always a challenge. And I'm really glad that has worked out. Oh, in the chat room, some people are saying the GCA Book from Darryl Gibson and the Jason Deon practice exams. So you got some recommendations already, places to go. And I've heard those were pretty good as well. So those would be something you can think about from working there. It's always more than one resource. Use as many resources as you can manage, as you can find. Anything is going to help you as you work through those. Let's go back and get some of the questions from the chat room. I'm trying to fit through here. So the CCSP is a certification offered by ISC Squared. Is that the same as the Cloud Plus by CompTIA? Is it more advanced? I have quite honestly not done a one-to-one comparison on the two. Cloud Plus seems to be getting a little more popularity, but I don't know between those two. I've looked at the Cloud Plus exam objectives at a very high level, not in no detail whatsoever. And I don't know that I've ever looked at the CCSP exam objectives. So I'm not quite sure if those are comparable to each other. That would probably take a little bit more work. But even if they weren't, or even if they were, the question about whether one or the other is the right option is usually based on what you want to do. So you should always be looking to see, where do I want to go next? I've often said we get that question, that horrible question in a interview situation where they ask you, what do you want to, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's like 2 jobs from now. 5 years could be many different things in my life have happened in 5 years that I could never predict. So 5 years is a long time in the world of IT. I often tell people, what do you want to do next? Think about what the next step is. Don't worry about 5 years. 5 years will take care of itself, trust me. Just figure out what the next thing is. So you know you're going to be in this position now. You're working at a help desk. You have a network position. You have a security position. You're working somewhere. You're working with servers. You're working with Windows. You're working in a database. Whatever it is, figure out what that is. Then what do you want to do next? And all of your efforts should be laser focused on that. Now you've got a place to go. If you're working in a network operations center and you say, I want to go into security. Okay. What entry-level security positions are available in your area? Well, it's research time. Get a spreadsheet, open up Google Sheets, go out to the local organizations, the big companies in your area, look at their pages that they have on their website of open positions. Go out to the dice.coms of the world, have a look at what's open in your area, start putting those things into a spreadsheet, and start, find those jobs you think you qualify for, what the next step would be that you would qualify for, put those into the spreadsheet, and now find out what they want. Now, of course, don't ever think that a job posting is the be-all, end-all of requirements. As someone who's written a lot of job postings, I'm throwing the world in there, hoping that I get somebody that at least matches some of those things. They really don't need someone who has every single one of those things. Well, they probably do, but they're never going to get somebody who has every single one of those different things that they know about. But they want to get somebody who at least fits that flavor. So they may be looking for a particular formal education. They may be looking for a certain amount of experience. They may be looking for certain certifications. Make a note of those. It doesn't mean that you have to have those to get that position, but at least you know what they're asking for. And if you start to see, hey, Cloud Plus is coming up in a lot of these, Network Plus is coming up in a lot of these, Security Plus is coming up in a lot of these, now you know what your direction is. Now you know where you should be focused on this. The other thing that I will tell you that becomes really useful is if you can go to your local user group meetings. And I've mentioned this many, many times before because I used to go to all of these local user group meetings. I used to go because I was presenting at these local user group meetings, but I got to see the people that were there. And it was all of the technologists that worked in the local area. So every open position in your particular line of work was represented by the people in that room. Everybody in that room had open spots in their companies. You just need to meet those people. You don't have to go in there and push and give everybody a copy of your resume and here's my card and get me on LinkedIn. But it's nice if you can meet them and find out where they work and find out what they do and ask them, I'm looking at moving into something relating to, pick a technology. I know I saw on the website that you guys have some open positions. What would you say you're looking for a position like that? And see what they say. See, because they know the people already working there. They already know their capabilities. They're going to give you an example of the type of people that they hire. I'll also tell you, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that inside most large companies, there is a finder's fee for bringing someone in and getting them hired. So if I work at a company and I get your resume and I give that resume to HR with my name on it and they interview you and you end up getting hired, they give me money just because I gave them your resume. So I have a lot of friends who are very good at asking for resumes. Oh, you have an interest in that? You should send me your resume. Let me get on your LinkedIn. I will send your resume over to these folks. Also, I will tell you that knowing somebody in these companies is almost more important than knowing what you know. It's not what you know, it's who you know. There's a lot of truth to this. Now, obviously, they're not going to hire you if you would never be able to handle the role that they're going to put you in. But having two people with the same skill set, except you happen to know somebody in the IT department who already works there, moves you up a bit because now we know you. We've seen you at the user group meetings. We understand the level of knowledge. When you talk to somebody one-on-one, you get a feel whether they're with it or not, whether they really understand what's going on in the world around them. Those are the things I think that really help whenever you're trying to get that leg up. You're trying to get that extra move into an organization. Those are the things that can really help. So you should already be working on those things. If you're not part of a user group meeting, they're also really a lot of fun because you're always talking about some kind of technology. It's a very relaxed environment. It's not all formal. You're not all in ties and jackets standing around. You're having pizza. There's some soft drinks. You're able to talk to other people that are in the industry. It's really quite nice to visit with folks and talk tech and talk about the new Star Wars trailer and talk about the new game that's out and talk about tech some more. Those are the fun parts of what we do. And if you're not doing it, you're missing out on really a big aspect. It's not all about computers. It's never about technology. It's always about people. And as soon as you're able to get that out, like it's not about operating systems. It's not about buffer overflows. It's not about intrusion prevention. It's about making sure that the people who need to get things done are able to do that. And it's because you've got your security in place that they're able to make that happen. It's about the people. So make that shift, change what you're asking. What are you doing next? Get laser focused on that, and you will be able to get there. That's the beauty of information technology. The jobs are out there. The opportunities are there. You just need to go out and grab them. It's really that easy. It works for everybody. So how do you find these user groups? One good way is to simply Google Microsoft user group, Cisco user group. You can also go to, meetup.com. I found to be a good resource for this as well. Not every geography has a good group of user group meetings to go to. So if you're very industrious, you may find that the Microsoft user groups aren't attended as well as you would expect. Maybe you make sure you do a Microsoft user group. Maybe you've done something really interesting with Microsoft Server, with Microsoft Exchange, with O365. You've done something recently that you could spend 30 minutes telling people about. Maybe you're the speaker at the next user group meeting. That's completely reasonable. You have a knowledge that other people do not have at that meeting, and they have a knowledge you don't have, and the conversation can get started. So those are the ways that I would find those user group meetings. I would think Microsoft and Cisco are like the number 1 and 2, but there are plenty of other user groups and plenty of other ways. If you are in any major geography, so in the chat room, you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you throw a stick and you will hit a user group. There are tons to speak of in your particular geography. And it works that way usually in very large areas. In the tri-state area, you'll certainly find a user group because it's all the tri-state area. In the quad, you will certainly find a user group. Now, if you're out in a very rural area, it's a little different. You have to do a lot more online. You have to be a little more industrious. You have to really find them and do as much virtual as you can. But those are becoming more and more common. And certainly YouTube is a huge piece of that. So take advantage of it. There's plenty of ways to go about making that happen. And I think you can find a good way to make it happen too. Well, that brings us to the end of another user group. Can you believe it? We went another hour and 20 minutes. And we still managed to make it happen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the first hour of the Q&A. Thank you so much for your phone calls. This gets a lot of fun every single time to be able to do it. We'd love to have you come back next month. We'll do another one of these. We appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus User Group. I said users group. It's the study group. You know what I mean. Thanks, everybody.